Hi, everybody. Roz here. Welcome, welcome. We are talking about cannabis legalization in New York, past, present, and future. I'll bring myself on screen. Hi, everybody. Welcome and good evening. Good evening. Roz McCarthy here, founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I want you guys to get ready for a just dynamic conversation tonight. We're talking about New York. We have some outstanding folks that are going to be specifically talking about legalization and how it will affect this great state. I want you guys to get ready to share your screen. Share this live event tonight. Let's make sure we get it out there. And first and foremost, I got to make sure that we thank the folks that are helping us put this together. The folks with GTI and FP Wellness, great folks that are working with M4MM to reach out to our community, to make connections. And we're so grateful, GTI, so grateful for your support. And hopefully their folks will be able to come on towards the end of the evening and just give you a personal greeting. But let's get things started, guys. Share your screen, share your screen, share your screen, share this post. First and foremost, I want to bring in, hey, Dr. Adams, how are you?
Hi, how you doing, Roz and everybody? Dr. Adrian Adams.
Hey, Dr. Adams, introduce yourself to everyone. Tell them who you are. Tell them what you do and why this night is so important.
Hi, I'm Dr. Adrian Adams. I'm the CEO of Ontogen Botanical CBD and the New York State Director of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Tonight's important because we need to start a discussion amongst as many constituent parties as we can in order to make this social equity money, in particular created by the MRTA, actually make it down to people who want to own businesses and work in the new industry that's being created. So once in a lifetime opportunity to start a new industry, and we need to try and roll it out right. And so we want to hear and share everybody's voice in the process.
Absolutely. And not only roll it out right, but talk about and learn from our past history and how do we make it better. So with that being said, I will bring our folks up. First, I'll bring up Mr. Al Florent. Hey, Al, how are you? And as he's coming in, we'll bring up Miss Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, help me with your last name. I think it's Jusetson. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Liz Justison. Hi.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to put a little extra spin on there.
That's okay.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. We're so excited. Hey, Al Florent, how are you? How are you? Okay, we may not hear him yet.
I'm fine. Roz, my connection.
Yeah. We're gonna take you off, and then when you get to it,
can you hear me? Okay.
No, not really.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in my house.
Okay, we'll bring you back, and then Shanae Bullock. Is Shanae? Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Hey, Shanae, how are you? Happy to have you here tonight with us.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm wonderful and just really excited to have a dynamic, diverse conversation being brought to the table with minorities as a representation of the indigenous peoples of Long Island.
Absolutely. So, Shanae, kind of give us a little background about yourself. It's obvious that you're a Long Islander. Share a little bit about with everyone who you are, your community that you represent, and just a little bit about what you do.
Nadasui Sakampanayu Mishuna Tuyusqua, Wachi Shinnecock, Wachi Pamanaki. My given name is I Lead Canoe. I'm Butterfly Woman. I come from the people known as the people of the Stony Shores, which translates to Shinnecock, the Shinnecock Nation, which was located in modern day Southampton. And we are located on what we call Pamanaki, which is what most people call Long Island. So we are the original inhabitants, and we still live in our traditional territory. So I actually wear a hat of being the managing director for Little Beach Harvest, which is our nation's, the Shinnecock Nation's medicinal cannabis business. And so that's why I'm here to also be one of the minorities in this panel. And I'm just really excited about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us. And then Elizabeth, please introduce yourself to everyone. I know we got Jetson is how we pronounce your last name. You're an attorney, your connection to Long Island and your connection to cannabis.
Yes. So currently, I'm the Chief Community Outreach Officer for the Legal Aid Society in Suffolk County. But for 10 years, I was in the courts defending people on numerous charges, including marijuana, until 2019, when some of the items were decriminalized. And now we're looking forward to, even further, not only not seeing people come in on these charges, but I run a small program called Breaking Barriers, where we help people post-conviction. And there's some post-conviction relief for folks who have had marijuana charges in the past, who can they'll either have automatic expungement, or they can seek motions to get resentenced and have their cases sealed.
Wow, that's awesome. And it's such an important part of the conversation outside of just legalization and what this means from an economic perspective, but also what it means from a social justice perspective. So let's go deep, because I want you guys, you are all Long Islanders, Suffolk County. Tell me about your area. Like, for anybody that's out here, if they don't know what, Long Island is about, talk about your community. Talk about what it means to be a Long Islander. Share a little bit from your perspective.
Long Island is an interesting community. It's very larger than many people think. And there's I believe about 1 million people out here, maybe a little more, and a little more than that, somewhere around there. It's enough.
It's like 1.7 million.
Oh, okay. There we go. And it's interesting in that the communities of color are actually pretty concentrated. It's a fairly segregated area of New York, but you have beautiful beaches. An interesting collection of people. The rainbow. You see everything from farmers to, Manhattan socialites out in the Hamptons, out near Chanel. What do you see out your way, Chanel?
Well, it's interesting that you say that about the minorities, because just from my perspective, right, an indigenous perspective, we've been there since the time immemorial, right? Southampton being the first contacted place to the natives in New York, and the establishment being Southampton. So a lot of the minority communities, and just kind of stepping outside of Shinnecock, a lot of those areas, there's an area called the Hill in the Southampton. Then you go out a little further, you have the East Hampton, which has a historically Black community out there. And then Riverhead has some enclaves of minority communities. So a lot of those areas have historically kind of always been thriving with minorities. And it really hasn't changed so much. You are kind of jumping into gentrification, especially when you get to talking about the Hamptons, if you will. In our case, we haven't left our homeland. We're still there, but a lot of our land has been encroached upon. So, we're kind of surrounded by 3/3 of water, which is kind of a marshland. So, we kind of can't go further back into it, or we'd be in the water.
You'd be in the water.
Right. And so, when we get into just talking about the diversity of that, there is diversity as far as, people of color. And then there's also economical status diversity. You have the Shinnecock Reservation, if you will, and then you have the Hamptons, which is drastically different. And so, here we are entering an industry with hopes to be able to really help sustain ourselves as a community, not only just in the Hamptons, but just in the world,
Absolutely. And then I see that we have Assemblywoman coming in. Hold on one second. Hi, Assemblywoman. How are you?
Sorry for having a little technical difficulties. I hope you can see your cell phone.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Do us a favor, and please, we just got started. So happy to have you. Introduce yourself to everyone that's listening to us and watching us, and just tell them who you are and what area you represent.
Sure. So I'm Kim Jean-Pierre. I represent the 11th Assembly District in the New York State Assembly. And district is 11, and which is Suffolk County, the town of Babylon, which is central Long Island.
Awesome, awesome. So listen, I was just having a conversation, just kind of like a lot of folks, when they think about New York, what do they think about? First thing is either in the city or one of the boroughs in regards to like Brooklyn or, in Queens and things of that nature. So I was kind of laying down the foundation of, what is Long Island about? What does it mean from a community standpoint? What does it mean to everybody here on the panel? Because everyone's from this area. Can you talk from your perspective? Like, tell me about your community. What does it mean? What's the knit? What's the fabric that draws everybody together?
So I think I can get a good perspective. I'm originally from Brooklyn.
Okay.
And came out here for Stony Brook and never left. But my district is very diverse. I represent a very large African American white population, and you wouldn't believe, one of my districts, I have the largest concentrated Polish community in New York, one of the largest. And it's very diverse. People have the same issues like New York City. Schools are so important to us here. It's not like you have one school district, but out here you have multiple, about over 120 school districts. So you go to school where you live. So you do hear stigmas but it's a great place to live. It's a great place. I love it. It's very diverse. A lot of people who are from the city live here. So it's a very diverse area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we talk about this, Elizabeth, from your perspective, what does it mean for you? How long have you lived in I don't know if you, and you guys got to help me out. I know you said Suffolk County. So are you, on the island, or kind of like, give me an idea of how that looks like? But how long have you been here, and what does it mean, kind of community to you and your family?
So I've born and raised in Suffolk County, lived here my whole life. In fact, anything west of Route 110 would be the city to me, pretty much. I've ventured a little bit into Nassau, but been in Suffolk County my whole life. From a criminal justice perspective, there's definitely some inequities that we absolutely need to address. Suffolk County is actually the 13th most segregated county in the country. And that really manifests from after World War II with bank loans and housing. We have issues of systemic racism, not only in the courts, which, when we look at Suffolk County has a smaller Black population than the rest of the state. It's about 8%, where the state is around 13 or 14%. Yet we're still matching the amount of people in the criminal justice system, the Black population, around 40%.
Wow.
So we have an even greater disparity than the rest of the state and the country. And we also see inequities with who gets into different specialized treatment courts. We see different outcomes for people in the court system based on race and ethnicity. And these numbers are available through Division of Criminal Justice Services. So we have a lot of work that needs to be done to address these issues, and not only inequities in the criminal justice system, but through the family court system, housing, policing. There's a lot of things and ways that we can move forward. And I'm hopeful that the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act will be one step in that direction, because I want a community that includes everybody.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that act. We got some points that you want to share with us as we get a little further into our conversation. The ideal about this conversation is going from past, present to future, and it's cannabis legalization and what this looks like. So we got to go back and look at our past, right? The past in regards to, for me, because legalization, cannabis wasn't legal. It's all about social justice. And I think, Elizabeth, you really hit on some strong points. We're knowing that from disproportionately, Black and brown communities were more so hit in regards to policing, incarceration, arresting, as it relates to this plan. And I would love for you guys to just share from your perspective, your memories of the war on drugs. Like, I don't know, I want to say a 70s baby, but I'm a 69 baby, so I'm 51. So I remember my community where I live. Do you have any experiences and memories of different just policing that was very deliberately towards, Black and brown communities?
Well, I can tell you I definitely do. As somebody who went to high school in the early to mid 80s, I can tell you policing was very different. I've been pulled over in every vehicle, right down to an actual skateboard. it's just a different level of monitoring that goes on. And I actually lived in Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre's district back in the day in a very heavily a Black community called Wyandanch, and there were police everywhere. It was a very different situation for those of us who were existing under it. And I can tell you that I'm happy that in some sense that lately there's been recognition of the differences and starting to address it. And I hope with the help of Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre, we can move in the right direction.
Absolutely. Assemblywoman, yes, ma'am.
If I could just chime in, one of the great things you see here on Long Island is that the population has shifted. So where it used to be dominantly white, in particular in some communities, no longer. You have really of Black all across the island living in areas that gerrymandered out Black folks go into certain schools are people of color living in those communities. So I think that conversations are so strong, and people of color who hold really dominant positions. My position is, it was a great guy, never been held by a person of color. I know, we have people of color who are sitting on our benches now in family court, and surrogate court, and our deputy county executive, a Black woman, our deputy police commissioner, a Black woman. So I think that the fact that changing leadership positions and putting people in position to be able to have those real uncomfortable conversations is so key.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Shay, your thoughts in regards to what we've seen versus our past when it comes to, communities that have been targeted and decimated with the war on drugs period, and knowing that it was deliberate targeting that was going on. Your thoughts? And I know you're a young woman, but those stories are still there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't speak about it enough. I always say the laws that were created were against our way of living as Indigenous people. There's still laws on the books, unfortunately, in the town of Southampton that doesn't allow Shinnecock women to go and forage medicinal plants. We talk about the highest law being the treaty law that's being broken. So I can't say that I have seen that. I know through oral history being passed down from my ancestors to my elders, I've learned a lot. My mother has grown up on the Shinnecock Reservation, and her father, and so forth and so forth. And there has been a substantial change over the years. I would say that, unfortunately, it's a little easy to target us, because the jurisdiction stops when you come onto the Shinnecock territory. There isn't. We supersede the state as well as the federal government. So we have our own ways of governing ourselves. But when you leave that territory, you're easily to be targeted because of the color of our skin. You can easily identify who is Shinnecock because it is the Hamptons. It's not that diverse like the rest of Long Island still. You have it a little bit, but not so much. And especially last year, our young people actually stepped up and really, kind of stood up against systematic racism. And it was really beautiful to see in the Hamptons, Bridgehampton, Hampton Bays. And these were my younger cousins that were organizing these things. And it was just really good to see. But also, they were doing a lot of surveying. And really what comes down to it is you're not going to see so much of the physical violence that we've seen throughout the country, and probably more so towards New York City. But you do see a lot of traffic stops, as well as arrests, unfortunately, because of possession. And, I have younger cousins that are still locked up and going into adulthood because of possession or something very small. And so when we lose that population within our Shinnecock community, we begin to lose our culture. So we've been seeing that over time, since it kind of started, since the laws were kind of created, and they were kind of created to somewhat police us, if you will. We were actually gated in our community, which we have roads called Westgate and Eastgate Road on the Shinnecock territory in representation of the original gates that the town of Southampton had put to keep us in, basically, leaving that our territory. So, but because we have dark skin, we're treated just like everyone else is.
Yes.
So, that's kind of what I'm seeing as far as the past, and what I've been
Right.
told and what I've experienced.
And hopefully we'll have some changes with our future. So Al, so happy to see you. Want to bring you in on this conversation. We're talking about, again, past, present, and future of cannabis legalization. And we know our past. I mean, we're still dealing with federally that it's still illegal. And now we do have legalization that is now being realized in New York. But can you talk about some of the historical war on drugs and how just, from the Suffolk County perspective, what we've seen and how there was targeting, and that the social justice aspect of what we focus on has to still be a priority?
Well, and by the way, thanks for inviting me. I'm sorry, I was having some technical problems getting on here. Now, I can't speak too much about Long Island, although I'm a Long Island resident for the last 4 years, but I'm a Bed-Stuy guy, born and raised. Still got my house in Bed-Stuy. So certainly, look, the war on drugs is something that we are terribly familiar with. That's back starting in the Nixon era, and so that's nothing new. For folks in Bed-Stuy, I think, and I'm not the best person. I know social equity. In my mind, in fact, I was sharing this with Adrian the other day. In my mind, is one of the 4 pillars to this cannabis conversation. The pillar that a lot of folks and I have really focused on, though, is the business opportunity / investment in cannabis. Because once you have social equity, the point is, okay, what are the businesses, giving us opportunity to get into business? So the question becomes, what business?
Yes.
The other issue is also the legacy market. People that are entrepreneurs, they've got a book of business, but they've been working behind the curtain. So now when that curtain gets pulled back, where do they go to learn how to be legitimate business people that are going to pay taxes and they're going to have attorneys? In fact, I was just on a call the other day about social equity, and compliance is a major issue. Major issue. So
we're gonna hold that thought on that, because I want you to weigh in on that. But I want to set the scene for our present right now, and I want to make sure I get Elizabeth. Elizabeth has, as she has shared with us some really good, strong, just information on the MRTA. That bill kind of brings us, Elizabeth, as to where we are in modern today. We're now in 2021. Well, let me go back for a second. Assemblywoman, when the medical program came to New York, are there any on Long Island, and anyone can weigh in, do you guys have access from a retail perspective? Did you see businesses be able to get established in your communities under the medical program? You're on mute. There you go.
Not medical. Not in my district.
No, there's one dispensary in Riverhead.
Riverhead, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we go back.
The jobs and the money never came to Long Island. The larger multi-state operators extract the money from Long Island, essentially.
The other thing is that in this bill, the city, towns, and villages have the right to opt out in retail sales. And, when they first talked about legalization, Suffolk and Nassau counties were saying they weren't going to be joining in, and they would be.
Wow.
There has to be a permissive referendum, and they have to do that by December 31st of this year. But I would not be surprised if we see many towns and villages across Suffolk County saying not in our town.
Wow.
But that's actually an issue, because even though they're opting out, they're really not. You have towns may say that they want to opt out. The incorporated villages, of which there are many on Long Island, can go and can override that and say we're opting in. And so now you're going to have towns next to other towns where people are just going to come and go and bring their cannabis back. There's delivery services. They're not going to dodge the situation.
Yeah, yeah. Al, you had a point?
Yes, in fact, I'm out here in Freeport, and I do understand that to be the case. But I think what's going to happen is when these towns are right next to neighboring towns where where they have accepted it, and they're bringing in that tax revenue, and doing projects in the town, and the citizens are happy with that. I think that's going to change people's opinion.
I agree.
It's always about the revenue. It's always about the revenue.
So I actually went to a virtual meeting with all the town supervisors, and there was a Newsday article that came out that they're a little bit more open to learning how, one, the revenue works, two, how the whole legislation works. So we actually had a great meeting, and I'm very optimistic that I'm hoping that they don't opt out. So let's see where it goes now. But they have been having meetings with advocates and learning how the revenue works. And I think when they realize how important and they can utilize revenue in their communities and how they can actually utilize the money to
do good stuff.
There you go.
Yep. Shanae.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's important to note that not just Shinnecock, but some of the other tribes, but since we're talking about Long Island, we've made our announcement in the medicinal cannabis industry since 2016. And the thing is, there isn't that much government to government conversations being had. So we're kind of left off, like just, oh, that's them, that's what they're doing. But not realizing that it's still going to affect the citizens of New York, whatever we do. We don't need a license, one, to enter in the cannabis industry, be it legalization, be it medical. We don't need that. We have our own laws, and we have our own regulations. We have our own ordinance. And Little Beach Harvest actually is a tribal, registered tribal operation, and has a license through the nation and is chartered through the nation. And so I think it's important for the government to government relationships to be had with our community, especially when you're talking about the town of Southampton, East Hampton, these other places that are trying to figure this out. If you have a big nation that supersedes the towns and the state and is in federal partnership with the United States government, but has a agreement with England, it's important to rope that body, that government inside in the conversation as well. And so where we sit is that we are minorities, but we are not going to benefit from any of the taxes made by any of the businesses that enter this space. We don't a street light fix. We don't get a piece of gravel for a road. We don't get any kind of medical care or help or any of things like that. That doesn't come from the state. So at the end of the day, if it was us that taught people how to make corn and how to survive on Long Island, and now we're entering in this industry that is a medicinal plant, which we know that has been used by indigenous people for thousands of years, it's very imperative to have that conversation with our government that is older than the state of New York. Just to have a government to government, because we will be a dispensary and a wellness lounge and having a cultivation center to hopefully employ other minorities, to do business with other minorities, and not just other minorities, but any of the citizens in New York that, and of course, tribal preference, but also selling to and off of our territory. So it's important because, this is something that we've announced for well over 4 years now. So it's important that we're roped into those conversations as well with the other towns as they're making these decisions to see, okay, well, what is it that the Shinnecock is doing? Because perhaps maybe we have something that the town could model after.
Yeah.
Well, to build off that, I just have one thing that I would like local legislators to consider, and that is that you're going to have the opportunity right now to actually make your rules and decide how cannabis is going to happen where you live. And moving forward, if you decide to wait, you have to understand that in the cannabis industry, a day is like a month is like a year. Things are moving very quickly, and when these regulations come, they're going to hit like a wave. And the other towns around you and these out-of-state operators are going to come in and dictate what you can do and what you can't do. So deciding that you want to wait and see until the end of the year when you have to make up your mind is not a good idea. And also, Assemblywoman Solange, which is in Nassau County, right north of you, Al, sent out a survey to all her constituents a couple months ago, and 60 marijuana. If a ballot referendum is brought in November, it's going to pass. So you might as well just embrace the change that's going to happen and consider zoning. Zoning is a big deal with this. You don't want to keep the dispensaries and the lounges out on the outskirts and in the alleyways, and it sort of reinforce the stigma of it. You want to include all the voices that you can and make sound decisions.
No, I agree 100%. I think the point is that townships should figure out where this fits. I understand about it being kind of an unknown, but the legacy market will continue to ride high if the townships do not figure out opportunities of bringing those folks in. Don't you agree, Elizabeth, in regards to just the legacy market isn't going anywhere? I mean, it's being fueled by the opportunity of having legalization.
Mm-hmm.
And if towns and localities do not embrace it, big business will.
Yeah, no,
so
I agree 100%.
If you really want to benefit local people and include, this bill talks about 50% licenses to equity applicants. If you really want that to happen, and that's the legislative intent, you need to embrace it, even if you feel a little guilty about it. You don't have to buy any, you don't have to use any, but the majority of your population already is and was well prior to the legalization of these low-level amounts.
I think that's such a great segue. Let's talk about the MRTA. I want to bring something up and share with you guys. I want Elizabeth to really walk us through this. This is important. And for everybody that's out here, I want you guys to see just what we're talking about and the importance of it. And I'm praying that my system here is going to do me right. Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
And here we go. Are we in good form, Elizabeth?
Yes.
All right. Awesome.
Perfect. So this is just a very brief overview. So if you want to go to the first slide, just giving you some highlights. So public possession is for 21 and over. There is a separate law for under 21. We'll touch upon that. But it's legal to possess up to 3 ounces or 25 grams of concentrate. And what they did is they basically took higher levels and then reduced them. The violation is now 3 to 16 ounces and then 24 grams to 5 ounces with a fine. Misdemeanors, you need over 16 ounces to 5 pounds. So they've really reduced a lot of the weight amounts that are criminalized. And that makes a big difference because now we can seek retroactive resentencing and potentially expungement on cases for people who were criminalized in the past but are no longer criminalized. So that's the possession amounts. And if you want to go to the next slide, we have sale amounts. So it will be an unlawful to sale, but that's a violation. For small amounts, we're talking about sale of drugs normally would not be a violation and a fine up to $250. And you need much larger amounts to be charged at misdemeanor level or felony levels. Now, of course, if you sell to under 21, any amount, you risk being charged with a crime of a misdemeanor. But there's a defense that if the person is within 3 years of your age, that it won't be charged as a violation. So again, we see this trend of decriminalization and lesser charges. If you want to go to the next slide. Just a few extras. Basically, if you can smoke tobacco in a certain place, you can use cannabis there.
Wow.
Yes, throughout the state. They can put, localities can put limits, and we may see no smoking anything in certain places. So government buildings, 50 feet away from certain things. Those rules now all apply to smoking cannabis.
So, hey, Elizabeth, let me ask you a quick question. So if we had someone, pretend like if you had an establishment and that establishment had smoking, like you could smoke in that establishment, does that mean that you could, so basically you could create your own cannabis consumption lounge by the fact that you already allow smoking?
If you allow smoking tobacco there, and it's legal under the current laws of the locality, yes, they could smoke marijuana there.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Looking at like bars with outside areas where they allow tobacco, they would also allow the marijuana. But if they opt out of smoking completely because they don't want marijuana, they'll be smoking it in their parking lots, right? So that's what folks would do. Under 21, smoking is and possessing are still not permitted. However, when we're looking at if you possess or use under 21, there's a provision under the MRTA that allows for a civil fine up to $125 or 20 hours of community service, but localities have to enact legislation to make that enforceable. So as of right now, that I'm aware of, you can, even under 21, could possess without any penalties until localities actually enact legislation to make it a violation. There's nothing you can do. And the smell or sight this is specifically written into the statute, which is unbelievable. It's very progressive, especially for someone who's a defense attorney.
Yes.
The smell or sight cannot be the basis for probable cause. Why? Because it's legal now, certain small amounts. The only exception is if they believe that you're driving under the influence of it, because that is still not legal. And people can possess up to 6 plants, 3 mature, 3 immature, up to 12 in their household. They can have up to 5 pounds in their personal residence as long as it's secure and not accessible to someone under 21. Now, again, localities can put in regulations to change some of these rules, but as of right now, we haven't seen that happen as far as the cultivation and the home possession, just like with the opting out of selling. And what's really amazing here, in general terms, sale of drugs used to be just passing drugs. Even if no money was exchanged, no favor, that was a sale, B felony. I've had someone give someone, let's say, a Percocet because their back hurt, but they got set up. That was actually a B felony sale. Under the marijuana law, sell specifically must be in exchange or dispose of for compensation. So they're basically saying there has to be either a money or a quid pro quo of some other bartered exchange, actual tangible. So that's a really interesting development in this from a criminal defense attorney perspective. And then the last slide, which I think is really important. If you had a prior marijuana conviction, that would no longer be a crime under the MRTA. There's automatic vacature, dismissal, and expungement of those records. That's going to take time. And there are some concerns because I recently had a case from 1975 where it was charged as a controlled substance charge. And I actually had to do a motion for a client to actually get we're working on it. It hasn't gone through yet, hopefully next week, but we're hoping to get the expungement for him. If a prior conviction would no longer be a crime, but a violation now, or a lesser crime, you have to file a motion, and within the so as of March 31st, the state has 60 days to come up with like a form motion that people can do to seek a resentencing and hopefully also sealing of those cases. And it's interesting, the courts in the statute, if you pled guilty to certain marijuana charges, the court must presume that that plea was not knowing, voluntary, and intelligent. And if you are convicted after trial, courts must presume the conviction and sentence is cruel and unusual punishment under the state constitution. As long as you can show ongoing consequences, which if you have drug charges that or possession charges, that always has ongoing consequences. So there's really some amazing reforms in this bill that can really help people. And I run a pro bono project, which means the services are free at Breaking Barriers, where I will help people with these motions. So I'll certainly send you that information that you can blast out to everybody. We don't charge for those services. So if people think they're eligible, you have them contact me.
That is one of the most progressive bills that we have seen nationwide. Can you give a little nuance between the that was the MRTA, and it wasn't the CRTA that was coming from the governor's office? Was it as progressive, or do you think that that this bill really did a great job in trying to cover all the different bases and all the different points?
I really believe that this bill was about justice and fairness. Okay. That's the best way that I can put it. This really, and I would love to see it, hopefully in the future, move to other offenses as well. You know, and you mentioned earlier, like when you were growing up, when I grew up in the 80s, and as a white person, you know what I saw on TV? It was always about crack babies.
Yes.
And black and brown young men being paraded in front of the TV in drug raids. And, and the war on drugs, Nancy Reagan, say no to, just say no, just say no. And we know that the war on drugs has failed. And when it really started to hit more affluent white communities, now everyone wants to say it's a disease and we have to treat it as such.
Right.
Well, if we want to take that position, we should start making these types of reforms for all types of drug possession and all types and low level sales, because the reality is most people are selling at very low levels to support their own habits. And it's due to a lack of resources and the ability to get the treatment they need and people's underlying trauma that lends them to using substances to begin with.
Exactly. Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre, what was your thoughts when the MRTA came out? Were you like, did you see it as it was being developed, or had you had a chance to, after the fact, see it as a really progressive bill as well, and think it could be something that will be a positive for the community?
Mm-hmm. So the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic Legislative Caucus worked really hard to ensure that this was going to not only give people who have been plagued by the drug and wars an opportunity to be not a worker, but to be an owner. That was so key for us. And to make sure that that revenue was going back into our communities, to fix our schools, to fix our neighborhoods, to make sure that our kids can go to quality education. It's not Wyandanch versus Half Hollow Hill school districts. And Dr. Adrian Adams would know that. From Wyandanch, you would know for the 4-block radius, the different school district that you go to. So it was so key. And our sponsor for the legislation, Crystal People-Stoke, she's an incredible sponsor. We had Biggie Smalls' son come meet with us, talk about his role, and just different advocates, J.R. Smith. There were so many top leaders, and it showed that that people of color can be owners. And how do we make it where it's not only J.R. Smith being able to afford it, but the guy around the corner who was selling it for so long be able to be his own business owner and to learn the skills how to be a business owner, to make sure we have those resources there.
No, absolutely. But Al, that goes back to you. I'm bringing it right back to you, Al, because I'm thinking in my mind, like, that's the intention of it, but how do we make sure we execute, and especially when we're talking about different townships and municipalities opting out? Your thoughts, Al?
Oh, geez. That's a good question. I mean,
because J.R. Smith is going to go where he knows he can go. He can get the real estate. I mean, it's so much. Like, this industry is the most compliance complex driven industry we've ever seen, in our lifetime. So, how do we connect those dots so that the little man also gets in as well?
Roz, a lot of the chatter that I hear is about, high end, ownership, and people are asking, some of the seminars we've done, people are asking about owning dispensaries and things like that. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we just start finding a niche? And again, we started an investment group, and there's 12 of us, and we own positions in 9 different cannabis companies. And so one of the things I'm preaching is, you don't have to, there's different levels of ownership and participation. Not too many of us have, hundreds of thousands of dollars to file for licensing and this and that, but we can all start getting into this industry again from an economic standpoint. And that's the thing that we're preaching. We don't want to see this industry pass us by as many other industries have passed us by. The house, I just read an article the other day, back in the 80s, they were auctioning off houses in Harlem. They had 13 townhouses landmarked from $5,000 to $40,000 in Harlem. Townhouses. The city owned 60% at that time of the real estate in Harlem because people were deserting the community. And we had opportunity. And there's been other industries where we've had opportunity, and for whatever reason, we haven't been in the. That's right.
Yeah.
This is a time. This is the next best thing in my mind. And we have to figure out a way to get in on whatever level and create business opportunities for ourselves.
Yeah. Hey, Shanae, how do you talk about, your community, the indigenous community, and your ability to be able to create business in cannabis, because you don't have to go through that process? How can we either learn from what you're going to end up doing or what you're doing and bring it outside of those that sacred community and be able to maybe do business together? How do we bring and bridge these two communities together? Because like you said, if we got pulled over or if we got stopped or if someone was targeting based upon color, we all look the same. So it's not like they know that there's a difference. So we gotta, I guess our main thing is, how do we just kind of work together in creating the generational wealth and opportunity that we think is going to be available?
So that's really awesome that you're asking that question, because the first thing that came to my mind was something that was being said last year a lot, is that the Black liberation equals indigenous sovereignty.
Yes.
It goes hand in hand, right? And so with that being said, just an example, I'll just give you just kind of a little insight of what we're doing, right, with Little Beach Harvest. So Little Beach Harvest being kind of a big corporation inside of a nation that will have multiple different small businesses. Our job right now, the only way Little Beach Harvest is going to be, in my mind, just successful is if the tribal members of the Shinnecock Nation support this business. But in order for them to support this business, they have to feel that they are being supported before we even take off. So what we've been doing now, since we've pretty much made our announcement, is focusing on professional development. Brother Al said a little earlier, having our people being able to understand how to run those kinds of businesses. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of our own people, unfortunately, that don't know what a profit and loss analysis report is, don't know what a 12-month rolling report is, don't know how to actually give a pitch. They don't understand those things. We have plenty of people that do, but it's my job to make sure that we can have more that understand that. So before we even open our doors, our focus is on professional development to those that want to have, we climb the ladder in the corporation of our, in our business, or if there are individuals that have the experience, have the knowledge of the plant, have the vision of the plant, but maybe lack the funding, create financial programs for our community through our business, just like any other business. I've worked for big corporations before, and there's always a charitable portion of that corporation where they give back to communities, whether that's through scholarship, through business incubators.
Sure.
Those different types of things is what we're actually already focusing on. We have different departments. We have natural resources department, economic department, health department, wellness department, environmental department, education department. We have the same amount of departments that the United States has, pretty much, as a nation. So my job is to make sure that I'm working with those particular departments to figure out, okay, if it's environmental, well, we can teach our young people sustainability in the development of this business, even if it's just the structure. You know, if it is economics, okay, well, as we're raised, as new business needs to be developed, we'll have people that are innovative on creating those ideas because we've been focused on really getting them to that. A lot of times, as people of color, sometimes we wait to the last minute, and then all the opportunity is up, right? Prime example, you know, the PPP loan came out. A lot of people didn't know about it last year, but everybody knew about it this year, and they're kind of late to the party, right? So it's important that, you know, my position as a business leader within my tribe is to focus on being able to give people those opportunities now. So if it's resources, there's tons of free virtual resources. This right now, you know, sending this to our internal tribal departments, you know, getting people excited about it, having those one-on-one conversations. We have young women that have been growing cannabis and hemp, and men that have been doing it, turning it into body butters and things like that. But now how to teach them how to scale their business, how to actually turn it into something that is investor ready, you know, those type of things. The idea is great and being able to do it. So I think, and as far as the bridge is concerned, this is also an opportunity for those that might not quite touch the plant, if you will, that might not have to need a license, but still have a passion and understanding about this medicinal medicine. There's still a way to do business to business with Little Beach Harvest. The biggest thing there is, the biggest challenge is that there isn't interference with the state of New York. Like I said, we don't have to have a license, but it seems that anytime Shinnecock tries to do something is put up a monument, you know, sell a cigarette years ago, there's always some sort of interference, but there's never, let's help them, you know, never any of that. So I think that's kind of like the biggest thing right there, is that if we're going to build that bridge to be able to help others that need help, because we have that capability to do that, we don't need interference in doing so. Because there can be business to business that's had also.
Well, this is a great segue because we want to talk about the future of and the promise of the MRTA bill that was now, you know, statutory is going to be able to be the framework for the rules and regulations. So, you know, Elizabeth, you talked about so many great nuances in the bill, and the one that I really want to focus on as we are getting towards our end time is the promise of social equity and the future of it and what it looks like and the intention of the bill. But how do we make sure from our rules and regulations, that those promulgated rules and regulations, that the intentions are executed so that we see the promise of, you know, what folks are wanting. Like, you know, when you guys sat there, Assemblywoman, and have these different speakers, and as you were churning through and working late at night and working on this bill, we want to see that the execution meet the intent that you guys put in. How do we do that? How do we prepare for the future of social equity?
Well, I think one of the barriers that we have to acknowledge is whether there's going to be disqualification due to people's prior criminal records. And I will suggest, you know, Shanae just brought up the PPE under the CARES Act. That was denied to small business owners due to criminal convictions, despite having a conviction many years prior. And one of my biggest concerns here when we want to push for 50% equity, you know, in the licensing, who will be disqualified because of criminal records? And I haven't heard the answer to that yet. And that is a serious issue because we know that there's inequities in who has a conviction and who doesn't. And people move forward in their lives, yet it's not recognized in a meaningful way. You know, throughout the country, let alone in New York State. So there are things, one thing that people can support right now is the clean slate legislation that's pending up in Albany, which would provide for automatic sealing and expungement after certain periods of time once you've completed all your court mandates. And that's a way for people to get a new start. And that could allow for more people to be eligible, because I didn't see specifically, but I would almost guarantee once the Regulatory Commission comes down with the rules on the licensing, there's going to be bans based on certain criminal records. So that would be my big concern right now, inequity.
Absolutely.
To build on that, I just want to say that, Assemblywoman, I'm so happy you're here, because there is, my concern is really, we have this social equity money that's going to be collected, the intention is for it to make it to people on the street. There's a gap right now, and that these coming regulations are hopefully going to help connect those two. My suggestion, and I would love to talk to you more about it, is to actually use the government programs and services that already exist that can be modified to provide the education, training, and mentoring that's really going to need to be developed in order for people to be successful, much as Shanae was saying before, to learn how to be business people and to learn perhaps from other dispensary companies how to run a dispensary, let's say. But you can take something like the minority and women-owned business is also a veterans component to that enterprise program, where you actually learn how to go through and develop your own business. And when you're done, you're eligible. Right now, the point of the program is you're eligible to be to get a step up in government contracting. With the all things being equal, your company would get a government contract after being certified as a minority women-owned business. There would need to be a lot of tweaking to focus that on cannabis. So consider that going forward with your colleagues to actually use what exists in order to deliver.
Yep. Assemblywoman, did you have a question or a comment before I get to you, Al?
I'll go. I'll go.
Okay. All right. So go, Al, and then we would love to hear your thoughts.
In line with that, actually, this is a question. What role should our community educational institutions play in this? When we're talking about training, etc., I just saw something that Syracuse is starting a program. I'm in conversation. In fact, I spoke to the dean of business at Medgar Evers, and she made it clear to me, while there are some champions, if you will, at the school, that the college in and of itself is not squarely behind cannabis. Yeah. But it seems to me, that they're embedded in our community and they're charged with educating our community. And this is what's needed for those people that want to go into business. Again, going back to the legacy market, training these people how to be true business people in the sense of entrepreneurs, in the sense of the word. So that's kind of a question. What role should our educational institutions be playing in this?
And Assemblywoman, I want to also add this to you, because this might be something to think about, and then I would love to hear your thoughts. I live in Florida, and Florida A&M University, which is a land-grant historically Black college and university, receives $10 for every medical marijuana card issued or reissued in the state of Florida. So they now, as a university, not only do they want to participate, or they want to figure out how to participate in research and marketing and outreach, but the other issue is that those universities don't have this big, huge pot of funds to be able to support the education that they want to do, or they may want to connect with the community. So I think when we talk about the use of social equity dollars, or the use of even tax revenue that's generated, let's go back. Maybe it's not this session, but go back next session. If we have universities that are specifically in our communities and they're needing resources to then provide the education and training, let's get them that money, and do it that way. So yes, Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre, your thoughts.
That's a load you just guys gave me, but I would start with Dr. Adams. I would love to connect with you, and I think what I will say is for Al is I did go to, actually, I went to Medgar Evers, but I can't speak for their where they stand with cannabis. I don't represent the area. But what I will say is that one thing that we saw with on the job skill training and opposite of vocational training, we did see a lot of the universities do certificate programs for manufacturing industries, and particularly here on Long Island, we have our community colleges providing awesome programs, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to shift, and I will be on board with looking through our budgets to see how we can help our community colleges, our state universities provide the training and the skills to make sure, because we're doing it with the manufacturing industry, we're doing it with the green jobs industry, so this should be part of that industry.
And there's going to be tax revenue coming from the industry that's supposed to be used for that. So,
absolutely.
So they shouldn't. Hopefully, they won't give you too much. Like, oh, we don't have the money. Yeah, we do. It's coming from the revenue on the adult use side.
Absolutely. And I think the training, Alan, Shanae, you said it right on point. The training is key. You can give someone can get a job, but keeping the job is key, right? So you can become an owner, but staying an owner is key. And how do I obtain those skills to get those good government contracts? How do I get the certifications? And access to information is key. A lot of people didn't do PPE because they just don't know about it, or there's a language barrier. They just don't know about it. So the access to information is vital.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Is there any, in quotes, pressure being put on cannabis companies operating in the state to do training and provide employment for people in our community?
Well, I think this is from my knowledge, and then I'll tell you what's happening in other different states. In some states, not only was there a strong emphasis on social justice, social equity, there was also a strong emphasis on diversity and inclusion, which would then look at the HR side of it all in regards to what's your community engagement plan to make sure that your workforce is representative of the community that you're serving. My thoughts on that is that if you don't put something and make it a policy for an operator, I think they may have intentions, but the prioritizing that attention to make it a reality sometimes is challenging, to say the least. And I'll put that nicely.
And can I add that I think this is the time, right? Because starting with bail reform, starting with police reform, legalizing marijuana, there is a strong presence in many industries to diversify their staff, the makeup of their company. People are changing their entire slogan. So this is the time where we need to have real conversations and not put band-aids on certain things so companies can look good and look good through data, but are not really diversifying. So these things are so important.
And that's where the training comes in, because if you have one, shout out to, we did go to GTI and we said we need to do outreach and we want to do it throughout the state. And they were willing to work with us and provide resources to help us to organize this. But it goes past this, and we need the GTIs of the world, in New York, to make a commitment. And maybe if those partnerships with the training, like the community colleges, if they were providing the training to get folks where they need to be, with the thought that you had some type of entryway or pathway from a career. And the other thing is, and hear me on this, Shanae and Elizabeth and Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre, we don't want to see us only in the entry level positions. The ones that are just paying the $10 to $15 an hour or what have you. I think there's a real opportunity to create career tracking and understand what that looks like.
Absolutely. I think that's why the legislation took so long to formalize, because our body, we were 61 members in our caucus. Now we're 68 members.
Wow.
And we were so adamant about making sure that, yes, we want union jobs. We want the great stuff. We want that. But what we want is ownership.
Yeah.
And what we need is ownership.
And what we need is ownership. And I'm gonna get back to that. Say your point right quick, and I want to go back to our ownership conversation right quick. Sinead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's also important now. This is why I say, like, not wait to the last minute, like when the dispensaries begin to open and things like that, but start seeking jobs now.
Mhm.
Like, and I say jobs because that gets you the experience that you need when you want to have ownership. Prime example, myself, I've worked in corporate America at some very high level positions, and now I'm able to be a managing director and a CEO of my nation's business. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I had not taken some of these other roles elsewhere, if you will, kind of being like, the Trojan horse effect. I think that's important to kind of, for our people to really think about,
So as we start to kind of wrap up our evening, and I'm so thankful for you guys sharing your time with me. Assemblywoman, you really talked about ownership. Can we also address the fact that the ownership may not be touching the plant, that there is opportunity from the ancillary side, but we need to get buy-in from those operators to do business? Basically, that supplier diversity conversation, Al and Dr. Adams. Let's talk about that. There are so many different entry ways from ownership to own your business. It may not be the dispensary or a cultivator or a processor.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we want to really focus in on that and make sure that we remind people, look at the ancillary side of the businesses. So as we wrap up, Assemblywoman John Pierre, what do you think we should be doing in your community right now? And especially, and I'm going to be really deliberate, with our Black and brown community and our population that are kind of sitting. You got some people that are getting a little aggressive saying, hey, I want in. And some folks are still not convinced. Your thoughts on what we should be doing as an advocacy, as M4MM and other advocates, what can we do to continue to engage?
Well, I think it's important that the groups that are already should be coming together. I think having that dialogue and that communication, sharing information, because the ones who are on the ground know the people, right?
Yeah.
And I think so that's so key. It's making sure that we operate with grassroots efforts. And in one of our hardest hit population who's still on the iffy side is our Black churches.
I was going to ask you about that.
They're like, what did you say? You said what, kid? These are my kids. So, it's really having these, because my mom, she still doesn't get it, and it's still really having these real conversations with our clergy leaders, our faith-based community, and giving them where, just as your title says, where we were, where we are, and where we could be, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I think these conversations need to be happening. We need to bring in the faith community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to ask that question as well. Al or Dr. Adams, your thoughts?
Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, so from the social equity, social justice standpoint, going forward to the future, we've seen and talked about how the Black population on Long Island in particular is less than 10%, yet 40% that's in jail. Our people have been harvested from the streets and fed into the prison industrial complex. It's time to actually give back a little bit. That's the point of this. For those of you who don't really understand why there's so much focus on the social equity and social justice, it's a way of reparations without reparations, if you will. It's acceptable.
Yeah.
And there really needs to be a focus moving forward on providing a way for Black folks to get in and brown, to get back in the game and benefit from the burgeoning industry and not be left behind. Because once these regulations hit, once they're in place, they are very hard to change.
Yeah.
So please stay tuned, pay attention, speak up. Now is the time to speak up. And something we really haven't gotten into a lot tonight is that this is medicine. For many people, this is what it's used for. It is medicinal. Not everybody can afford the Xanax and the Percocet and everything like that. And as far as the gateway drug thing, let me just tell you, it's been being used by doctors as an exit drug to deal with the pain that underlies the opioid problem that to start with.
No,
That's it.
Preach, Dr. Adams. You're absolutely
Don't get me going on that. Don't get me going on that part.
You're absolutely correct. And then knowing that we have to teach our community about the different delivery systems. I know we talked about smoking, and there's so much more to this plant besides smoking it in regards to having access. So, you know, and I have someone on here talking about palliative care, and I am a big component supporter of palliative care and hospice care and understanding what the plant. Elizabeth, as we wrap up, your thoughts on I want to go back to the fact that if we don't speak to our the commission that's making the rules and regulations on making sure that people who have a past conviction are not penalized in entering the industry, we're going to have a problem. And if we don't address it right now, it's going to be an issue. And then we're going to look back and wish we would have said something now and said, you can't in one breath say we're going to pardon or we're going to fund, but in another breath say you can't have ownership. That's ridiculous.
And there are 107 occupational licenses right now that look to good moral character and look at everybody's background. And over the last 8 years, I've worked with well over 1,000 people who try to move forward years and years later and are constantly stigmatized, denied, and hitting brick walls in moving forward in their lives. And this is another way, you know, you can say equity all you want, but if you're going to, I don't want to say purposely, but if you want to exclude people, you're going to do it through criminal convictions and say, well, we tried, but people had criminal convictions. What can we really do? We tried. And then you have to look at intended versus unintended consequences. So it's really important as we advocate that we carve out exceptions for maybe drug possession, low-level sales, and nonviolent. I mean, I go as far to say it's violent because depending on how many years, people with violent crimes have the lowest recidivism rates. You know, these are things that are not well understood in the larger community. And we need people to really understand that opportunities and real meaningful employment are the number one factor as to why people will not recidivate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remember that you can have people, if we set these rules in place, they not only block you from ownership, they block you for anybody that just may want to even work in the industry, that just wants to have just a really good job, a 9 to 5 or what have you. You could be penalized because of some type of thing on your record from 25 years ago that doesn't allow you to work. And that would be a travesty. So Shanae, Al, Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre, Dr. Adams, it's been my pleasure tonight. I am so grateful to have you guys on. I would love you. Let's start round robin, and I'll go with Dr. Adams, and then go to Elizabeth, and then Shanae, and then Al, and of course we'll end up with Assemblywoman Jean-Pierre. Just one thing that you think the future of cannabis legalization in your community. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns, or what is your, where you see the promise of legalization? And Dr. Adams, you're first.
I see the promise in bringing the entire community together and having a common cause with cannabis, because even regardless of what certain reservations folks may have, there is obvious good that can come out of it. We need to come together and work with community groups that are already doing job training and things like that. Maybe even working with unions, in order to help with the job training and job placement. Some of these larger companies like a GTI could come in and say, okay, you know what, Evers College, this is the kind of employee we need. This is what we need to come out of your university. So when they do, we'll accept them. So I see a lot of promise in the future, and I'm very excited about it.
And before you go, Elizabeth, I see the promise of having reputable brands on the shelves of operators right now. Don't you, Dr. Adams?
Oh, yes. Antigen CBD. Yes, that would be very nice to be in these larger stores. I try to throw you an alley-oop. Yeah. I get so excited, I forget about myself. those of us who are providing high quality products that are compliant with the labeling and the packaging and all of that, we need to have that next step. Somebody mentioned it a little while ago that I think it was Shanae talking about being able to scale. That is something that certainly in minority communities, any business, that's something that traditionally hasn't been a divide that's been crossed easily, is to scale a business. So that could be part of the adventure as well.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, the promise, the opportunity, in a couple of words, the future of legalization in Suffolk County.
I'm really hopeful that the plan works in such a positive way that we really look to other drugs and decriminalizing substance abuse and at addiction. That's really what my ultimate hope is, that we treat all people who struggle not as criminals, but as people who have problems that we can solve as communities. And that the fact that, as Dr. Adams brought up, that we are using this as an exit plan for opioid use.
Yeah.
It can be classified differently. And yes, there are drugs that foster addiction, but if we treat them more in a humane way and address those issues, we're all better for it. So that's my real hope here.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Shanae, your hopes, your thoughts. How do we, the future of legalization? We now have a bill. It's time to rate the rules and regulations. What do you see, and for your community?
Well, I think Dr. Adrian said it. Is really bringing our community together. We're already seeing it within the Shinnecock Nation, is really kind of breaking the intergenerational trauma and curse, because it's really our elders that, we as young people want to have using this kind of first. And so, you have, and we live intergenerationally in our community. So we're actually already beginning to see them saying, oh, okay, they're learning about the plant because they come from a different generation. So that part, I'm already seeing the healing happening there. And then once that happens, we're going to be stronger. And in our community, there's also the economical sustainability part. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not getting anything from the state as far as helping us when it comes to taxes in this particular industry. So this alone is going to generate a substantial amount of revenue for our tribe, and to create those programs and things that I was talking about. But then also on the outside, it is also going to allow real proper business to business, proper government to government relationships, as we've seen over the last 400 years. We haven't really seen success in that. So hopefully this right here, is something that we can all kind of come together on. Plus, it is the plant that does that. It's our sister plant. It's a medicinal plant. It's a fibrous plant. It's a cordage type of plant also. There's many different uses for this plant that we are very educated on. And we hope to be able to be leaders in this industry and not be left out of it like we were in many of the other industries. So I see the unity really happening kind of all across the board, economically, social, with social justice. We too have a lot of people, like I mentioned, that have been locked up. So I hope to be able to see some of the programs for the expungement and things also extend into our community.
Absolutely.
That's what I see.
Well, you got my promise on that. You are a super smart young lady. I'm so excited for you and your future. It's bright. And it crosses over just in regards to your being on your land in your community. It is a worldwide, global view, and your conversation and the maturity of that conversation is just phenomenal. And I look forward to working with you. I think you're going to do some great things. And so, Al Florent, we almost taking it home, brother. The promise of legalization in this future. You now in Suffolk County. You got some great things going on with your investor group. Give me your thoughts in short order form.
Well, Roz, I think everybody would agree there's tremendous opportunity with this burgeoning industry. I think we have to get all segments of our community involved. So when Adrian may have touched on that, the not-for-profit sector, the religious community,
Yes.
All the educational community. It's all institutions on deck. We don't want to miss this train because for me and a lot of other folks, this is an opportunity to have a positive impact on the racial wealth gap in this country. That's something, again, I and a lot of people like me in my organization, we really want to have an impact on that. That gap is huge. It's getting larger between Black folks and others, and we see this as a real opportunity. And the last thing I'm going to say, because there's another train, and maybe Shanae knows a little bit about this, being part of the indigenous culture. There's another train coming around the corner, and that's psychedelics.
Yes, I agree.
Is next, folks. And again, it's an industry that we've not been a part of. And there's a lot of stuff going on around us that we're not aware of, but that's coming next. That's
I
coming.
agree.
Yep.
I agree. Thank you so much, Al, for being with us tonight. And last but not least, Assemblywoman Kimberly Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for being with us tonight. You get the last word, the promise and the future of the community that you serve. Thank you for being a servant. I know I serve, and I'm not. I wasn't voted on to serve. So when someone says I'm going to give you my vote, I need you to represent me. That's another level of just commitment. So I applaud you, sister. I congratulate you, sister. But tell us your thoughts on legalization as it relates to the future and the promise of it for the community and for the constituents that you serve.
First, I want to say thank you for having me. I think this was a great discussion. Meanwhile, sorry, I was talking to my 5-year-old, listening to my 6-month-old crying upstairs. But I want to say thank you. I think everyone here has a great opportunity to educate people. And I saw the comments, and one of the comments I saw was, really who's in office management of cannabis is key. As we create the Office of Cannabis, as we talk about the task force in the New York State, it's putting those right people on the task force. It's putting the right people in Office of Cannabis to make sure when we talk about compliance and we talk about everything else that we talked about today is so important. But where I see is connecting our communities coming together. I think Dr. Adams and Shanae said it, the generational gap, making sure that we can get the older generation with the new generation together, have some sort of common ground where we can be unified, and where we can see some ownerships in our communities, and where we can go to these big retails, we see Black-owned names on the shelf, you know? The same way it took us so long to have shea butter at Target, I want us to take a quicker time for us to see our products on the shelves, and that people can be supporting, whether you're Black, white, Hispanic, that you're supporting not a Black person, but you're supporting a business person, a person who has its own company. And that person may have not had a silver spoon, didn't grow up in a wealthy community, had some obstacles, had some struggles, but you know what? Is now an owner. So that's what I would like to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, you better just drop the mic on that one right there. So guys, thank you so much for being on with us this evening. We have met our time. We are committed as an organization with Minorities for Medical Marijuana to do the work. Thank you, Dr. Adams, for your service. He's our state director. He's reaching out. He's crossing bridges. Our next stop, we're going up towards north part of New York, the Westchester area, in a couple of weeks. We're so super excited about just keeping this conversation going. Thank you guys so much. Everybody that's on tonight, let me tell you something, guys. M4MM, we're committed to making sure that we do the outreach. And I always say this, I don't care if it's one person or 100 people. If we're touching lives and we're being able to have this conversation, and if you get one aha, one thing that you go, wow, this is what I need to focus on, it's worth your time and your attention. Please make sure you share this. Please make sure you talk about this. Please make sure you reach out. Reach out to M4MM. Let us know how we can help. We want to be of service. We're so grateful to be connected with you guys. I'm Roz McCarthy, founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We wish you all a very good night. And thank you again to GTI and FP Wellness. I'm sorry that we'll see you next week. You'll have your folks on with us, and we really appreciate you so much. Thank you once again. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Hi, thank
Good night.
you.